Welcome, everyone. My name is Alex. I am the founder and CEO of Redpanda. Thank you for joining us today. Super jazzed to have you along our first half-a-day conference. Today, we're going to, as Tristan mentioned, we're going to be joined by some leaders in AI, in finance, in social media, in infrastructure. And you're going to hear from our engineering team walking us through what I think is the best Redpanda release to date. And there's going to be some unannounced features, so make sure to stick around until the end. It should be fun. For those of us that haven't been following along, the way to reason about Redpanda today, and I think that's evolved over the years, is the simplest way to build data-intensive applications. And so when we first started writing the code for Redpanda and the way that we wanted to affect the change in the world, we started by building the fastest streaming engine that was just really easy to use in a form factor that people loved. And what that meant back in 2019 was a single binary that allowed developers to interact in their laptop and then, as you'll see today, scale to some of the world's largest workloads without really fuzzing too much with configurations or Zookeeper or the schema registry or the HTTP proxy. So like a really easy and intuitive way to get started. And part of the reason with that is that historically, to get the Achilles heel of a streaming has always been cost and complexity. And I think that the rest of the conference is going to give you pillars and a new way to reason about these data-intensive applications. And hopefully, as an industry, we're going to stop talking so much about this divergence between streaming and batch with a couple of key technologies we'll highlight today. And so about 3 years ago, we started to partner with some of the world's largest companies, and we delivered back then what was rather controversial back then, which was this idea that we called bring your own cloud. And so what it was is that as developers were migrating a lot of their workloads onto the cloud, they still wanted this idea of data sovereignty. They wanted to own their data. They didn't want to ship it around. And so we thought about, it's like, hey, what if we split the control and data plane, and the data plane lives inside your network, but you still experience a fully managed cloud? And so today we have ShareChat, and we have other customers like Dun & Bradstreet and Liverum, who's been one of our early design partners, talking about this idea of bring your own cloud. I think in nowadays is not so controversial. And so if you have any questions like, hey, how does this work? Please type them in the chat. Don't wait. We'll answer it, and we'll make sure that we'll follow up with you. We have the speakers and presenters. We're all hanging out in the lounges that Tristan just mentioned. And so if you're having any questions as speakers are going through, please just type it. Don't wait. And so we started, like I mentioned, with this really easy to use form factor, single binary laptop to largest workloads. Then we delivered this idea of a fully managed cloud in your VPC with BYOC. But over the years, as we migrated some of the world's largest workloads, what we learned is really the long pole for getting value out of building architectures differently rested in two problems. And so the long pole was data integration and then querying the data. You're like, okay, great. Redpanda is working, or you have a system that looks like Redpanda and it's working, and you're sort of sending it data. How do I get data into it? That was a big, it's still, I think, a big bottleneck. And then the second one is like, once the data is here, how do I meet developers where they are today? And so there's this natural maturing of the engineers' comfort with thinking about the world differently, and maturing of like the organization, et cetera. And so you have to meet developers where they are today. And so today we're going to talk about these two ends of sort of the spectrum, so that but you walk away with this are architectural pillars as an engineer, a builder, a maker, on how to reason about the world differently. And so we bought the largest connectivity company for the Kafka API. That was an acquisition that we called Bentos. And back then, I think we brought around 220 connectors. And and what it did is that it gave people the choice of like, okay, if you want to bring data from an SFTP, or if you have a file upload, or if you need to consume from Redis or other streaming systems, you can now start to merge your data and bring your data in. And over the last few months, we've been busy at work, and the connector teams have been. We're going to share a ton of content today. And so what we've done is that we've added about 60 connectors, including the most requested connector today, which is a binary change data capture protocol from Postgres. And so hopefully, like Tristan mentioned, this espresso shot, super fun, short, interactive demos where you get to ask questions from the people that built it is going to be helpful. And so that was really the first long pole. It was like this data integration. You're like, okay, that's when the rubber meets the road. I have this system. How do I get value? Well, you have to kind of get all the data in, and then at some point you have to ship it out to another system. And so if you were to think about where the platforms that look like Redpanda exist, they really fit in like the core sort of center of your architecture, right? We're not a database, and we're not a bunch of other things. We're sort of like the system that that makes the clock tick, if you will. So that was sort of the first thing. And so from today, some of the live demos that I'm really looking forward to seeing the team share with you is executing of local AI models via Ollama. You're also going to see our brand new Redpanda migrator component. And so often when you're mirroring data, let's say east to west or Europe to US or whatever, you may want to mask data, filter it to the simple message transforms. Maybe you even want to ship a little WebAssembly engine to this thing, so that as you're mirroring data, it's not just the schema, like the metadata about the thing, or maybe the access controls, it's also the data, but maybe the data looks slightly different as you're sort of shaping the data east to west, if you will. So we're going to see a live demo today from that, and really any Kafka API. We're also going to see a demo today from the Postgres MySQL native replication. So I'm super excited to share with the world that. Now, the second source of friction, as people started building what I called, the simplest way to build data-intensive applications, is landing the data in a query-ready format. And so about a few years ago, we talked about this idea that the world was going to coalesce about Apache Iceberg, and it has. And so if you've been following along, Amazon, I think, recently released the S3 table. I know Snowflake has announced support for Apache Iceberg. I know effectively every major query engine today has or is working on an Apache Iceberg integration. And what it does for you is that it gives you this zero-shot integration from being able to stream your data into your streaming platform as long as you schematize it, and then being able to query it. And so this is sort of this really natural evolution, and I hope that there's a ton more development there. And so that was the second point. You're like, okay, I'm getting my data in, and now I have all of these connectors that are pushing data into Redpanda, and how do I query it? Like, how do I access it? Like, there is this evolution into thinking about the world more naturally, sort of event by event, and yet making sure that your billing system still works, or making sure that your sort of retrospective analysis still works. We're going to have speakers today. Slava is going to be joining us today as a hands-on engineer who's built many systems like this at multiple companies. And so I'm pretty jazzed to have him. Last, I think I would be remiss if I didn't talk about one of the biggest pulls in the enterprise today, which is thinking about the idea of sovereign AI. And so let me give you the intuition so that you walk away actually with a different way to reason about the world. And so the idea of sovereign AI builds on top of our core concept of BYOC, which I mentioned, is the idea that you own the data plane. We're just like an orchestration layer, and no data leaves your network. So that's super strong. And we've partnered with some of the world's largest banks to be able to deliver this. And so the intuition here is that if you look at the world's best models, right? So OpenAI, Anthropic, with some of the world's best open weight models like Llama, I think this week alone, or last week, excuse me, you saw Llama 3.3, 70 billion being on par of quality of answers as the Llama 405 billion, right? And so the intuition for you is that if you fine tune and you tweak these models, you can get comparable state-of-the-art performance of quality of output, but at an order of magnitude better cost efficiency. And fundamentally, even if you didn't care about cost, which by the way, most people do care about costs at some particular scale, you develop a better user experience because the latency of execution is it's lower. And so, in other words, for this new state-of-the-art technology, the long pole is that sometimes waiting for answers takes a really long time. And so, if you lower the parameter model, if you fine-tune it for your answer, maybe the model, if you're parsing 10K documents, you don't need to know how to change a bicycle tire, but it just needs to know how to understand this financial document structure. And so if you discard the noise and you fine-tune it for your use case, you're simply going to develop a better user experience. So regardless whether you do it for cost or for better developer experience, the core tenet was to execute the state-of-the-art models in your data center without your data leaving. And that's the alpha. That's the really long pole. Your data with local models. And so I wanted to close off today by I want you to walk away with the intuition of how to build the future. And so I want to wrap up all of these technologies that I've talked in today, whether it's connectors or Iceberg as a way to query your data, as a way to land it in your data warehouse, that gives you sovereignty, right? Like the main difference with Iceberg, really, for you, the engineer, the builder who's listening in and dialed into this conference, is that you get to own your data. And so the keystone there is that you're accessing your data in the best way possible, not in the only way that vendors are allowing you to access your data. So an example is if you send your data to a query engine, and the only way to access that data is through SQL, well, maybe that's great if you are extracting value out of that, but there's probably other samples or other ways that you could imagine building products if there wasn't that restriction. So Iceberg is really critical as an architectural primitive to give you freedom of how to build future products. And so the way we kind of put it all together for people was what I called Redpanda 1. And so over time, what we have seen in the world is an explicit trade-off between how fast and the dollars being spent on the infrastructure. And so when Redpanda came to market, we really focused on the operational data warehouses. And I think we're one of the best engines there. Like if you require low latency, transactional semantics, durability, availability, I feel really proud of the engineering work that we've been able to do today. And I think over time, you're seeing this because of AI and other pressures, you're seeing like more use cases being adopted in the streaming first because it's a more natural way to reason about the world. And so for us, as I talk about the roadmap of Redpanda, Redpanda 1 sort of coalesces this idea into a single engine. So the idea is that as a developer, you're going to shift away from thinking about clusters into thinking about topics or tables. There's going to be this unification of the duality between tables and streams. And I know we're going to be joined today by a longtime friend, Tyler Akidao, in just a few minutes, where we're going to dig into that. But for the engineer is that if you have an infrequently accessed data, you can choose a write-through cache through object storage systems. But if you care about your operational data, you also get to dial it. But conceptually, you operate at a topic level. Whether you're schematizing it for querying later, or you're bringing data in, or you're choosing the latency and dollar spend spectrum, we're here for you. And that's what I called Redpanda 1. It's sort of a single configuration, a different way to think about the world. So thank you for joining us today. If you want to get in touch with me, the simplest way to get in touch with me, I mean, this is like, basically, you can email me, find me on LinkedIn and of Blue Sky, which is, I think, where all of us data nerds have recently migrated. or on GitHub. Super easy to be found. Please ping me or reach out to me if there's anything that I can help you with, or if you just want to brainstorm about the future of data. Always happy to connect.